So we're at the appropriate time and the appropriate place, so we'll call this meeting of the Kansas City Water Committee to order. And okay. Let's see, Bill Bradford is not here. Dean Brady is here, Beth Ketchmar's here, Doug Cohen's here, Blake Osborne's here. Tim Payne's here, Wayne McFall is not, Tim Dennehy is not. I am here and Andrea Stein. And okay. So on old business, we did meet last time. We talked about committee organization. We talked about maybe going to a 2-hour meeting, which we did this time. And we talked about prioritization of topics, and we did review the extraterritorial ordinance for in lieu of fees. And that has already passed. So we're good there. And now for any comments on the old business?
Question.
Sure.
So sorry I missed the last meeting, but under prioritization of topics, is that like a list that's published that we can look at, or is that
So,
these right here?
Thanks.
yeah,
These are probably, okay.
well, those are standing topics.
Yeah.
And what we did is possible topics that we talked about last time included public education, with the possibility of surveys. Talked about functional grasses versus ornamental.
And the water master plan.
Water master plan.
And that, we talked a lot about like water usage, and education on water usage, water conservation is a topic to be brought up in the area. Consumer use, so that we can, start educating people on how we can be more conservative with our water usage as a prioritization.
And we talked about, in addition, the city publishes a water rate table for different amounts based on usage, amounts of usage. And we talked about maybe having a bigger balloon, a bigger step in between the steps for the top category.
Yeah, we compared the water tables of the water costs of our water costs compared to other areas of similar size. And how that maybe that one of the ways we can get conservation better from the consumer is to actually maybe charge more for water, especially on different tier level. So we can get people to think more about conservation
Right.
and development procedures too.
Along with that. I guess it got a little bit of an issue in the fact that you drive around town now. When you drive around neighborhoods where the houses used to have nice lawns and everything,
Right,
guess what they got now?
like weeds,
This tall.
yeah, but that's what we were talking about, that is, educating people on xeriscape. But looking at other ways that we can landscape without just grass, so that we can have nice looking yards, but without the use of the water consumption of some of the grasses.
So in order to save water, to use less water on your grass. Would there be some kind of way to incentivize people to xeriscape other than just high prices?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
there-
Colorado
yeah.
Springs does it.
Yeah, Colorado and like Las Vegas, Nevada does it, where they're actually buy your, they buy your sod, so you can then put something else in. And that would be, that would be a program down the line, but even just education, so it's like, hey, if you switch to this, yeah, maybe some kind of incentive, things like that. Yes, we talked about that.
Beyond the direct cost of
Yeah.
saving water.
Yeah,
Travis, are we to the point like now, okay, it's hot, it's been hot for a week. Really hot. Is it draining the system of domestic water?
And not this
No.
year.
And one of the things that says that is there's no ditches that are on call. So, for example, Deweese is a big one. If it's a dry year for Deweese now, go down to 1 day a week,
Yeah,
then we see a lot more usage. People go to city water for that second day. Or if they shut down our like late August, September, when it's still hot, but Deweese ain't flowing anymore. That's when we'll see another bump up because people still want to take care of their lawns, but they won't have that ditch water. Pump ditch, I think, goes up for the fall sometimes as well.
well, if South Canyon does, it's probably pump ditch does, right?
Yeah, that usually, because they feed the Crooked or,
Yeah, South
and the
Canyon
pump.
feeds those two.
So I'll catch a call every once in a while and then again, we'll see, not check based on that because people can't use the ditch water to then irrigate.
This particular year, we're probably.
Right, so your question in this week. Of course, we're higher than we normally are.
Right.
Or higher than average, but but we're not strenuous.
And to yours, Tim, yeah, I go by every morning and check our overflow west down here, and then I go check the Virgin Dam. And we're still dumping a decent amount of water over the boards. So, yeah, the river's still good.
Yeah, absolutely, and just kind of a secondary point on that, you never want to get to the point where you're straining the system. You don't want to use that as an inflection point. Yeah.
Other topics we talked about included storage at that we talked about the Deweese expansion. They're thinking about adding a couple of feet or something like that. And Twin Lakes. We also talked about existing water tap redevelopment fees. That's something we talked about. And I think that just about covers everything that I wrote down.
This Canyon City got rights and use.
We have some shares on that board. If we,
Oh,
do we
we-
die,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I thought you said we stress for it.
yeah,
Deweese
Deweese
died,
died,
yes.
ditch, we
Oh,
do
the
have
cemetery.
shares. Yeah.
right, the
Okay,
ditch,
just-
not the reservoir.
Just a cemetery.
Mhm.
Yeah, but we don't utilize. them currently. I think they're looking at trying to. So I guess one question I have is thanks for reviewing that, and then since I missed it, I sent an email, I'm not sure if everybody saw that or got that, but I had a few topics, could that be entered in as well?
Sure, and you bet.
Okay. Yeah, that or. I don't have it pulled up. No, I mean, I have, sorry, I was. Oh, would you like to resend?
I think I've got it.
Just let me know if you need it.
What day did you send that? Do you remember?
It was a while ago.
Yeah, it was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, at least 3 weeks.
3 weeks ago.
Before.
Yeah, it was close to the meeting, but 7:10.
Mm,
I don't need to like. Say we can talk about them now, because just. See if we add those topics to the list for later.
Sure. That,
It's coming through right now.
get a lot of them in.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I did follow up saying that we're gonna. I'll give you them.
Somebody's phone.
Yeah, that might have been Amber's, I bet you that's why she came back in at best.
Oh,
Couldn't find
Hi.
it because-
I'll run it.
Couldn't find it because it was under
Yeah.
the newspaper.
Guarantee that's why she came back in.
Yeah, she was probably just calling it,
Yeah,
try to find it.
yeah,
Good
yeah,
about
all that.
Did we talk, I'm sorry, I stepped out. Did we talk about your draft roll ordinance yet?
No.
No,
Yeah.
that was in the email though.
Okay, hang on.
You gotta remember to get Glenda's presentation.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
We just got two things with Travis here.
Yes.
Steve, why don't you read those topics after, you don't have those with you.
On top, no, I don't have. I did send it to you.
Well,
Yeah.
But yeah,
I don't have it yet.
I should. I can read it
Please.
also.
Mhm.
Short list of topics would be important starting points listed in no particular order of importance. Number one. Land use policy and water policy, do they align? What about 50 years down the road, 100? Watershed health topics, including water quality and water quantity, and the role of regional partnerships with other watershed partners / authorities. That's right. Yeah, sorry, there's a bunch of stuff that's okay, you can reread it, you know, right? You'll need, And I did resend it to the group, just everybody
Okay.
will have it in their email.
Okay.
If you don't want to write it all out. Integration with state water goals and funding priorities to capture money for water planning. Or infrastructure. Water rights protection, including beyond just the city's water rights portfolio, to include consideration of autonomous water rights of community members, organizations, or at least not injuring them. State recreation campaigns and exploring community river recreation along with commercial recreation.
Okay. So of course, what we're trying to do, part of what we're trying to do is make sure that we can narrow that, you know, we've got our playing field is so wide that we're gonna have problems making progress unless we can narrow our focus down a little bit. And so that's what we're trying to do, get all the topics out there that we can potentially consider, and then at some point say, okay, here's where we want, gonna go with that. And so that's a, I think is, we have that on our standing committee topics. You might want to put that down there,
That was right.
add our priorities. On our standing topics, we do have a presentation from Glenda, so maybe we can just jump into that and,
That way she
Get that?
doesn't have to come back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again and again. I
So
assure
we
you,
love having,
this will not be the last time that you will see me. Just a forewarning, I guess.
yeah.
Travis actually gave you another copy of my presentation, but I noticed he stapled it backwards, so you might want to start on that if you want notes.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
All right, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Glenda DeBecker. I'm the city stormwater coordinator. I've been with the city over 15 years now. So, and I'm here today just to kind of give you a brief overview of some stormwater runoff impacts and management, history of stormwater permitting, the Colorado discharge permitting system and how it affects us, and our program in relation to that. And then some upcoming actions, which, like I said, as a water committee, I've been advised that you guys would be the best to preview before things go to council for decisions. So, and I have a couple more handouts as we get to those. So some of the stormwater impacts, why do we manage stormwater? It was always traditionally for flood control. It's now more not only about flood control on a local basis, but statewide and nationwide on our water quality. Stormwater runoff really impacts our water quality. EPA went after point source dischargers like industrial dischargers that first, cleaned those up and realized our waters weren't getting any better. And discovered that our stormwater runoff carries a lot of pollutants to our waterways. So as we get, this graphic kind of shows, as we become more and more urbanized, it creates more and more runoff. So when you have very little to no development, you're going to get a lot more infiltration of runoff into the ground. Of course, that depends on soils. With our clay soils here, you know, we get maybe an inch and then the rest runs off. But, and then as you increase urbanization and your hard surfaces, your pavements, your housing, all of that kind of stuff, it really decreases. You go down to maybe 40% infiltration. You get a little bit of evapotranspiration and the rest is runoff. So as an example, you have a field here, 100 foot by 100 foot, and then the same area paved. On the field, again, depending on soil type, with an inch of rain, you're not going to get any runoff. You pave that, it becomes 6,231 gallons of runoff with an inch of rain,
How much rain, Glenda?
an inch,
An inch. Okay.
yes.
So just one thing as you go through here, I'd suggest on the field portion that you have, rather than showing 0 gallons, that you show episodic impacts.
So,
Because the reason is because if you say 0 gallons, we have people that pay stormwater fees that say, I don't ever have any runoff. Why do I have to pay a stormwater fee? So that's where I'm.
and that's why, usually when I address those, it's at some point you are going to have runoff. If
Absolutely.
we get more than an inch of rain
Yeah.
in a short period of time, it's not going to be able to absorb it. This graphic was actually developed by the urban drainage. So they were kind enough to let me use this. So some of the stormwater runoff impacts that you see: increased flow and volume, leading to more frequent flooding. Stream erosion, which can widen streams and rivers, cause erosion of banks, loss of stability and structure on those. You get a lot of sediment, nutrients in the water, which have impacts. Both of those, sediment will cloud the water, which does not allow sunlight to get to the plants, so they can't use that for photosynthesis to create the oxygen that aquatic life needs in the water. Nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen, these are big issues right now. Algae blooms, again, algae blooms clog or, cloud the water, doing the same thing as sediment. They will, when they die, they sink to the bottom, and they also chew up oxygen during their decay process. With sediment, if it's a navigable stream and you get excessive sediment, you may end up having to go in and dredge that. So, and then loss of riparian habitat for wildlife and for cooling the water. Temperature is another big thing. And we'll touch on that a little later. But so bank erosion, we lose our grassed areas, our tree cover, everything that helps keep those waters cooler along the edges. And then water quality. With stormwater runoff, you get chemicals, biologicals, debris and trash, anything that hits the ground, oil spills, antifreeze, metal flaking from brakes. Anything that's on the ground has the potential to be washed into our storm system. And our storm system here does not go through a treatment plant. It goes directly to the rivers, drainages, and 4 Mile Creek without treatment. So this is one reason why we should really care about the water quality.
Linda, for the purpose of what we're talking about, what do you consider a navigable water?
So the waters of the US consider it commercial navigation, like the Mississippi or the Missouri, where they actually have commercial shipping on it. But they consider the Arkansas River navigable.
I can understand that.
Yeah,
That's a federal
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah, I can understand.
So it's almost in,
yeah,
under the federal definition, it's almost in.
When the Clean Water Act, when they were trying to change the Clean Water Act. The federal government was trying to make any water.
No.
we
No,
will,
no.
Doug,
That's the way
actually,
it
we'll-
is now. That's
Doug?
the way it is now.
I got repealed.
yeah, we'll get into that here at the end.
Yeah, that is to your question.
It's, yes, and this is a very important topic that we will be having on our radars. So water quality affects human and wildlife health, our recreation. It increases the cost of treatment. The more that goes in the water, the more that it has to be taken out of the Arkansas River for us to be able to have it for drinking water. Granted, our intakes are above Canyon City, but we all live downstream, so there's somebody upstream of us that's running it. What we put in goes down and impacts Florence and Pueblo and Penrose, so. So stormwater permitting, the Federal Clean Water Act was passed in 1977. It established the non-point discharge elimination system, NIPDES. We talked briefly about how first it went after industrial and point source pollution. Then it was expanded in 1990 to regulate stormwater discharges. Phase 1 was implemented first for medium to large cities and urbanized areas of 100,000 or more. We have 5 of those phase 1 permittees in Colorado. See if I can remember them all. Colorado Springs is a phase 1, Aurora, Lakewood, Denver, and I believe Fort Collins, I think. Fort Collins is a phase 1. The rest of us are phase 2s that fall under the second one. So basically it's anything 50,000 or less or 100,000 or less. Canyon City got caught up in it because we're not really an urbanized area. We have a smaller population. But with the Colorado and discharge permit system and the EPA, we have a population of greater than 1,000 people per square mile within our city limits. And we are adjacent to a drinking water and recreational water. So that's why we were issued a permit. Our permit was issued in 2003. The goal of this permitting is not flood control, it's water quality. That is what the focus is on. So in Colorado, the Colorado discharge permit system administers these permits for the EPA. The EPA does do a few states and tribal and federal lands, but most states have some sort of permit system and agreement with the EPA to administer for them. So we have Colorado Regulation 61 that says those with permits must develop, implement, and enforce a stormwater management program designed to reduce the discharge of pollutants from an MS4. And that's a municipal separate storm sewer system. MS4. What that includes, it includes all of our streets, curb and gutter, storm drains, storm pipes, storm culverts, channels, anything that will convey stormwater. So our phase 2 general permit contains 6 areas that we have to address, and the permit gets more and more prescriptive. So now it contains a lot of actual very specific things that we have to do or criteria that we have to meet. When it first started in 2003, it was pretty general. We got to develop our own programs. We still get to develop our own programs, but we have to make sure that each time we meet these more and more specific requirements. So the 6 areas are public involvement and participation, public education and outreach, illicit discharge, detection and elimination, construction sites, post-construction, stormwater management for new development, redevelopment, and pollution prevention, good housekeeping for municipal facilities and operations. I might touch really briefly on each of these. This is in how we address each of these. Public involvement participation basically is that we provide a way for the public to be involved with the stormwater program, to give us complaints, to report illicit discharges, to report complaints on construction sites, to report drainage and flooding. So we have a variety of ways. You can report through the city website, through SeeClickFix, you can call, you can text or email. Our contact modes are available in a variety of ways through the website, through newsletters, on our city social media. And I actually track all of these that come into me or that I'm made aware of, what we do to investigate, resolve them, or sometimes there is not an immediate resolution. Education and outreach is just exactly what it sounds like, making the public aware of what they do every day, the impacts it has on stormwater runoff and runoff quality, and therefore our water quality of our drainages and our river and our creek. We do these, and the permit actually now gives us specific things that we can do. We can go above and beyond. We can do things that are off that list, but we have to do at least 4 from the list every year, and we can change it up. So some of the ways we do newsletters, stormwater newsletters, bringing people up on current events, giving them tips, just general information, having a booth at community events where people can see demonstrations through our Enviroscape, lodge complaints, just pick up information, activity books for the kids. Again, presentations in schools, community groups to you guys. Partnering with and supporting local groups in cleanup events like the Rec District's annual cleanup green up, Royal Gorge Rio's annual river cleanup, Canyon Proud. And this is not always just the stormwater program. The big thing to remember is, even though we have a stormwater program to administer and do most of the permit requirements, this is a citywide obligation. So every department should be implementing procedures and events and things like that. It all goes back and we get credit for that, for meeting our permit requirements. So whether it's community services, holding a cleanup, or administration holding a cleanup, or the stormwater program, or parks providing pet waste stations in our parks and trails, all of that goes to meet. It's not just the stormwater program, but I do track all of that. Excuse me. Social media outreach, public service announcements on the radio, web pages with all sorts of information on the city website. And then, like I said, the parks providing signage and pet waste stations for people to pick up after their pets. And there's a whole lot of other things that can and will be done or sometimes get dropped out and replaced with something else. Illicit discharge detection and elimination. So an illicit discharge is technically anything other than stormwater going into our storm system. We do have exemptions, or they don't like to call them exemptions. Things that we don't have to enforce against. So like springs, uncontaminated pumped water, air conditioning, condensation, rerouted springs for construction. Let's see, dewatering a swimming pool as long as it's been dechlorinated, residential car washing out in the street. We do not have to enforce on those. They're technically illicit discharges, but the state is allowing us not to let those slide.
So what about pond water?
If it's uncontaminated, it can be drained. If it has algae and chemicals and nutrients, no. So, the program elements we use to meet this, again, public education and outreach. We have ordinances prohibiting illegal discharges. We do investigations when one is discovered or reported. We will do water sampling from ends of pipes that go into the river. If we suspect that there's something other than stormwater or groundwater coming out of that. Or other, I've done it on other pools of water that we suspected might get into the storm system, might be contaminated. We do have enforcement procedures ranging from a verbal warning, education, clear up to issuing fines. And then we train all applicable city employees. So that's everybody who basically works outside parks, code enforcement, streets, water distribution, on what an illicit discharge is, what to do if they see one. And that, so. Construction sites. The construction sites are written for what they call applicable. So that is disturbing an acre or more during construction, or less than an acre if it's part of a larger common plan of development. So that would be like a brand new subdivision going in. So we are tasked with making sure that pollutants don't leave a construction site, such as trash and waste, discharged water, concrete washout waste, sediment is the big one. So we address this through our ordinances, through site plan reviews, through issuing grading, erosion, and sediment control permits through the city, and doing inspections to make sure that they're what we call best management practices, their stormwater control measures are in place, appropriate, and being maintained, and that nothing has come off the site. So we have a very prescriptive inspection schedule that we have to stick to, and different triggers for if they need to be re-inspected at an earlier date. We do initial and construction inspections before they even start. Once they get their best management practices installed, we do an inspection, say you're good to go, or no, this still needs some work. We do a lot of education and outreach with our contractors and developers. One of those, we have a regional stormwater education committee, which is Canyon City, Pueblo West, Pueblo County, Pueblo City, and CSU Pueblo and CDOT Region 2. We put on a seminar every February for local municipal employees, contractors, and developers, so they can learn the latest and greatest in sediment and erosion control, controlling their sites, regulation changes, all of that. We usually get about 100 people every year attending that. And then we have, again, enforcement, where we can do a verbal written report, clear up to fines. And we can issue stop work orders if it's bad enough. Post-construction, this is to make sure that any areas of new development, significant redevelopment are putting in stormwater quality control features. They can also include or be combined with flood control. But again, this permit is about water quality rather than quantity. So, let's see, Kentucky Fried Chicken. They had to put a grass swale in which their stormwater or a certain portion flows to. It infiltrates, removes contaminants before it goes on into the system. So we do this through site plan reviews. We have very prescriptive, again, water quality standards that we have to ensure are being met, contained in our permit. Then we do inspections, not only during construction on the entire site, but when they're constructing these water quality control features, we have to ensure that they are being built as per plans. And then after everything's finished, the site's released, active, every year we're required, actually every 5 years permit term, we're required to do an inspection on that permanent feature to make sure it's being maintained and is functioning. Currently, I am able to do that every year on every one of them. And I've got, I hate to say it, I have the private owners trained that they know they're going to get a report from me. And that if it's not functioning, they need to address it. And so I have not gone to the permit requirement of once every 5 years, because my feeling is if I'd only go see it once every 5 years and something drastic has gone wrong, it's going to cost them a whole lot more money than if I catch it really early. So I strive to maintain that. We'll see how well that does.
Training is important.
Yes. And then as with all of these, there are database and record keeping. So I keep a database of all permanent water quality control features, of all the inspections done on them. I actually have a database for every piece of stormwater infrastructure in the city limits. And now that we have a stormwater maintenance crew, those maintenance records are being kept so we can tell you when it was cleaned. We have reports that go out, how much was removed during the year from our system, that kind of thing. And the final piece is the municipal pollution prevention and good housekeeping. Basically, this is inspecting our own municipal facilities, properties, and our operations, our construction, to make sure that we are not releasing pollutants. We outside of everybody else, we require it of ourselves also. So currently I have about 64 facilities that I inspect, and these have to be inspected yearly. So they get a report saying, telling them if maintenance needs to be done, etc. We have written standard operating procedures. We do employee training. Although it's not specifically in our permit, we also inspect all drainage channels and a good number of storm inlets, pipes, etc. Especially with the stormwater maintenance crew having the ability to video now. So all of that, and again, the database and record keeping. So that is the permit in a nutshell. I want to touch really briefly on upcoming water quality actions from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So there is basically an impaired waters list. It's called the 303D list. And it lists all the impaired waters in the state of Colorado and what they are impaired for. They are required by EPA to submit this every 2 years. We just went through in June the biennial for the 2024 list. The Water Quality Control Commission approved what CDPHE agreed. For the Arkansas River, we have been historically listed for cadmium and zinc. Those are from upstream sources. They already have control measures with our upstream, the mines upstream. But it is still impacted and still not removed from this list. For 2024, they're going to be adding monitoring requirements for arsenic and total and dissolved iron. Currently, those monitoring requirements do not fall on the city or the county. It will be done by CDPHE and their data gathering. And temperature will be changed from monitoring to impaired. There's a lot of discussion about the temperature. We could spend another 2 hours on that, so I'm not going to get into detail. If at a later time you want to discuss that, I'll be happy to. 4 Mile Creek, arsenic and selenium will be changed from CDPHE monitoring to impaired. So what does that mean for us? There is a program called Total Maximum Daily Load Assessments. So the state will come into for an impaired water segment, and each water body is broken down into various segments, which are listed. So they will come in with something's on the 303D list, and they will prepare what they call a total maximum daily load. And then that gets written into permits. So that basically says, takes into account background sources, just like from undeveloped land, sediment erosion, to MS4s, to industrial dischargers, to agricultural dischargers. And it assigns a certain amount that each can release into that stream segment. It will get written eventually into our MS4 permit. When and if that happens, it's a very long process. It means that we could get stuck with very expensive monitoring requirements, very expensive remediation, and others. So I actually am keeping an eye on this and will probably come to you at a later point, especially on 4 Mile Creek. There may be steps that we can take prior to ever getting a TMDL from the state. Because once you get that, it's very expensive, it's very time consuming, and it's very hard to fight. But you can take steps beforehand and go to the state and say, hey, look, we've already reduced, we've done some monitoring, we've taken these steps and we've reduced. So we could avoid that. I do have a handout if you are interested through the Colorado Stormwater Council, which Canyon is a member of. We got a kind of a document that walks you step by step through the TMDL process and the steps that MS4s or communities can take when they feel like there's a possibility they may get one. Again, that's one that we can visit again at a future date, but it's something that should be on your radar that may eventually come back down. We are up for a permit renewal, MS4 permit renewal. We're on administrative extension. It may not happen till next year, but TMDLs will not be written into this next permit renewal. It will probably be the one after. But the quicker we can take action, the better.
4 years or 6 years.
They are 5-year
5
permits.
year.
But the last one was issued in 2016 after a 3-year permit renewal process. And we are already 2020, so it would have expired 2021 or 2023. And they keep putting other permit renewals ahead of us, so. They did have an informational webinar and I do have the presentation. If you want to see the slides, I can distribute that.
Yeah, if you would send that to Travis and.
Yes.
Travis, if you distribute that.
Yes, sir.
The other is actually, it's no longer a draft. They did issue enforcement of unpermitted dredged and fill material into state waters. This is a direct result of the latest Waters of the US ruling from the Supreme Court, which removed a lot of waters that were previously tenuously under considered waters of the US. The big thing that the court did was they removed the significant nexus, which meant that if there was even a tenuous underground relationship between a wetland 20 miles from the natural waters of the US, it was protected. That was removed. Supreme Court says now those wetlands and riparian areas have to be directly connected. So the state is concerned that that leaves a lot of what they consider waters of the state unprotected. They developed a policy on how to now protect those. I will tell you the policy is not well thought out. It's not well rounded out. They will be bringing legislation, probably attempting next year to put something in, you know, as a regulation. So I do also have a handout, kind of a synopsis of that. And again, I'm not going to go into detail, but again, if that's something that people want to hear more about, we can. I can direct you to the state's website also for more information. And then I've already talked about the upcoming phase 2. And that is it in a nutshell. And if you have questions, let me know, or if you want to contact me at a later date, my information's up there.
Is the 4 mile issue, is that due to the gold mine?
Not so much. My feeling is, although I honestly have not had time to look at our soil surveys through NRCS, but I believe some of our soils are higher in selenium. I think this is a, yeah, the shale. Okay. So, I will tell you that arsenic will not be a high priority for TMDLs because the state has said they're waiting for the EPA to finish finalizing their standards before they institute state standards for arsenic. So we might have a little breathing room on arsenic. But selenium probably is going to be the big one. Temperature, I'm not sure how we would control that because they don't take in account flow and water level in monitoring for temperature, which is something that they've been directed for the next one to do. So we'll see on that one.
You said shale with and pointed north. Are you talking up Brick Canyon?
Yeah, right as you're going into Red Canyon, you can see it pop out. But then I believe further up, it's the Pierre Shale formation. It's the Hotbacks too. Okay, it's that same formation. We find fossils. And it goes all the way down to the lower our district down there. We have a whole program for water quality for farmers that are right over the shale. Trying to improve their irrigation below, basically reduce that water table. That stuff has uranium and selenium. So luckily they're not tagging us for uranium up here, but the selenium's everywhere.
Well, and selenium has livestock effects also. They will cause staggers and other neurological diseases in cattle. They graze on vegetation that's high in it.
That's how.
The selenium.
I'll collect what they call it.
depending on dose, selenium is in my vitamins, my daily vitamins. Just point that out for
Yeah.
everybody.
But
It's all dose related.
That would explain it.
Well-
Does the water
Good for people, not for
that
cows.
the hay is irrigated with? Okay, so if you're using Arkansas River water. Would selenium likewise concentrate in feed or just from areas like here?
Here it wouldn't, because ours pretty good water quality that we could take out from the ditches in the city. But the USGS has done a lot of studies and they say right around Canyon cities where we start seeing the selenium problem, mostly because of 4 Mile Creek. But it gets worse as we go down. So in town, I wouldn't think we'd have any problems with selenium in our hay, except for maybe where Canyon Heights up there might have a little bit, but it's not you go down the valley, it just gets worse and worse. And that's when you really see it start to accumulate to bad levels up here. It's an issue for the state, but the state says it's an aquatic standard, so it's mostly for the bugs and the fish that they're worried about. As you go down, then there's an agricultural standard that you get worried about, but up here, you're not really worried about.
Right, and so the section through Canyon City is not listed for selenium. It's for cadmium and zinc, and they're going to add temperature and what do you say, arsenic and iron, I believe. Yeah, I know it's in there. There, okay, yeah.
When the Clark Power Plant is operating, they gotta take water temperatures.
Yes, and that's exactly why this ditch exists. Because this was the cooling water, so it had to drop the temperature before it could go back into the river. So, but so that is, I mean, like I said, there are things coming up that, like I said, Amy at times bring to the committee. There have been other actions, other MS4s that have asked for letters of support in trying to get the CDPHE to be reasonable, especially with TMDLs and use sound scientific data. We're still continuing that. So those were all done right before the committee was formed, but may continue. And so you may get a request for discussion and suggestion of a letter of support from Canyon City. Because even if it's affecting somebody else in the state, it's going to trickle down to us at some point.
Just to point out, the stormwater permit that we have is a unfunded federal mandate. That's something the feds mandated that we do without providing any funds for the doing. And it sounds like there's going to be more mandates coming down as time progresses.
Yes, and this is where the I know stormwater utility fee is designed to fund all of these, and also for we now have a dedicated stormwater maintenance crew and back truck. So it pays for those. We've seen less street flooding with the recent storms because now our storm systems are clear. And yes, we do get more and more prescriptive. The Colorado Stormwater Council is already initiating conversations with CDPHE on the MS4 permit renewal to make sure that it's reasonable, achievable, and doesn't cost us an arm and a leg, and actually translates to improved water quality. That's a very, very important organization that we belong to because it represents 99.9% of the permitted stormwater permitted communities in Colorado. So we can present a united voice and perspective, even though we have different ways of achieving, we all want water quality, good water quality for our state. And even though it's unfunded, again, we do what we can. We don't have a choice about this, but I like to also think that we all are invested and want good water quality.
So now that Rose is fairly well finished, except for the problem with the railroad. Are there any other major stormwater projects in the purview? In the future? Being
Well,
looked at.
well, yes, you gotta realize that it's important to keep the separation in mind. When we're between talking about water quality and water quantity.
I understand very well.
We've got about. Hopefully now $62 million rather than $70 million worth of stormwater quantity projects lined up. That we've identified through engineering that need to be done to be able to handle stormwater flows through our system without causing some of the problems that uncontrolled waters can, like, erosion and things like that. And so we've got about 70 million. We had, several years ago, we identified about 70 million in water quantity projects. Water quality, that's kind of where Glenda was telling us about what's going on, things that are coming down the pipe.
And water quality is also, Doug, addressed any new development or significant redevelopment. They are required to install water quality features. And they also have, especially if they're close to a ditch or a ditch lateral, they cannot discharge anything above historical amounts. So that is one of our ways that we address water quality is unfortunately, it does pass it on to the developer. But this is also a state thing and federal Clean Water Act.
I don't know, I guess it depends on the amount of money you have in your wallet. But it's my understanding that you do not discharge any more than previously. My understanding is now that any stormwater intrusion into an irrigation system, is considered an illegal trespass.
And we've had those discussions, we've had committees on this. As far as I know, and Ryan, you can correct me, right now, while we're still working and while we do capital improvement, it's a very long term, but we are removing some direct connections from like city streets to the ditches. Unfortunately, we're dealing with over 100 years of our forefathers said this was a great place to dump our stormwater when they started thinking about it. So it's a slow process. We are working on it. Right now, the understanding or agreement with any new is that nothing over historical can go back into an irrigation ditch or lateral. We try to get them to even get less than that. But yeah, it's a long-term thing that we are working on, and with each project, we try to eliminate a little bit more where we can. We've had some failures. We tried that on Yale Avenue and ended up flooding the people on College very badly. So, yeah, so, and it's one thing, we do attempt to have conversations with city planners and engineering and everything when a project is of installing things like rain gardens or porous landscape detention, something that will slow that water down and infiltrate it before it goes in, even on city projects. It's not always feasible due to grade or whatever of the project, but we work really hard to try to incorporate as much as we can into that.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, realize that this is probably a political question and way outside my lane, but maybe you can answer this. My next one's gonna be type real. We have a stormwater department within the city. And I know other places might have a stormwater authority or a district, special district for stormwater that's maybe a little bit bigger than the footprint of the city, where we have like unincorporated areas, say Fremont County. I'm assuming they might share some of the infrastructure or route some of the water into the city's infrastructure, and how does that play into all this? And is there any, like, how does that limit you being a city entity or something as opposed to like a regional?
So our MS4 permit is restricted to our city limits. So we have very strange city limits. I will use Rhodes Avenue as an example. The east side is county, the west side is city. I have answered complaints from citizens on the west side about water coming from the east side, where I have no jurisdiction. We work with the county where we can. The county will probably never be issued a MS4 permit, a phase 2 general stormwater discharge permit. No offense, they probably will never meet the population requirements.
Well, the M stands for municipal.
Yes, well, there are a lot of counties that have what they call urbanized centers or clusters that have MS4 permits. I mean, Douglas County, Adams County.
Yeah.
And it pertains to the more urban clusters,
Looking at that?
but it's still a county permit. Fremont County will probably never get to the level of reaching unless just everybody in the state decides that they want to be here. Eventually, maybe Florence might end up with the permit if it grows enough. They are going to smaller and smaller communities and giving MS4 permits. Having said that, there has been different discussions about doing a larger stormwater authority, which would incorporate the urbanized area outside of our city limits. There have been different discussions. There are ones up along the Front Range, Southwest Metro Stormwater Authority is one where they encompass a larger Mile High Flood District encompasses a larger, and they have a permit. It can be done. It takes a lot of willingness and cooperation between the entities to do that.
So trying to do baby steps, like Jim Meisner and I tried to work together, like Rhodes Avenue. WPA ditch, because you got the WPA coming out right now into the city. We actually got some of the WPA cleaned out years ago, but I don't know, since I've been out of the county, I don't know if we're still doing that or not. And then the ditch coming out from 4th Street comes out of Dawson, comes into county, then back into the city. I was unsuccessful in trying to get that cleaned out some.
Yeah, we try wherever we can to collaborate, share resources if it's going to impact both county and city. But as far as our stormwater permit, that is contained within our city limits.
From my perspective, something to keep in mind is that there's the national, the MPDES system covers both water quality and water quantity. And when you're dealing with water quantity, what you're dealing with are practices, best management practices, like, straw logs, things like that to control sediment runoff, having the requirement that you have some type of water detention facility that allows no more than the historic flows into a particular waterway or something like that. But then you also have the water quality side of it, the actually numeric limits that limit you on different things, different chemicals, materials that can be discharged without treatment. And that's really the big stick that the state and the EPA has over cities that do have MS4 permits, is that if they do these studies on the receiving waters and say, okay, wait a minute, there's something here that there's a constituent, arsenic or iron or selenium, that's out of compliance, they can actually force the city to treat the water prior to discharge, treat stormwater prior to discharge.
So
And that's the big hammer.
let me, I'm gonna qualify that a little bit.
For,
So industrial and construction stormwater discharge have numeric limitations. So far, MS4s, all of ours are narrative. We do have some numeric or specific for development on water quality treatment that we have to meet levels, certain levels, or those do. We do not have any numeric effluent or discharge permits. So say the MS4 permit doesn't say you can only discharge this much E. coli or this much selenium. Where that comes in is when the 303 delist and then they develop that total maximum daily load. Then when they reissue the MS4 permit, they will do an addendum just to Canyon City's permit and say, you are only allowed to discharge this much selenium. Boulder County right now is the only one who has an addendum like that. It's for E. coli. Even though that they did studies and proved it was all wildlife related, the state says that we created the environment for the wildlife to gather. So Duck Park would be a perfect example if they would decide that we needed to control E. coli going into the Arkansas River. They would, and we say, well, it's wild geese and ducks. Well, no, you created that environment for them to gather and concentrate that. So that's kind of what you run up against. You know, they aren't willing to say, oh, well, yeah, you know, that's wildlife deer. Nope, you guys created the environment to get those animals in here, so.
You need to get those geese down to Doug Cohen's pasture.
Fertilizer.
Yeah,
Hey,
so.
down on my fertilizer costs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's why the TMDL process and keeping an eye on the 303D list is very important. So hopefully we can not get to the point of having a TMDL issued with our next, or probably 2 permit renewals.
you got a question, Bill?
I do, and it's because I didn't do well in chemistry. What are the sources of these contaminants in our community? Where are they coming from? And how do
So,
we minimize it from entering the water?
so selenium is mostly like from shale and sediment.
No control there. Okay.
No, you can control by land use and construction practices. That would be about the best way you could do that. Some does come downstream from the gold mine. Arsenic would be the big one on that one.
Okay.
Arkansas River cadmium zinc are legacy from mining upstream. They already have TMDLs upstream of us, but they haven't delisted. And once you get on the list, it's really, really hard to get off that list.
If there's active mining or not, that's a concern.
So we wouldn't really, I mean, we don't really have any active mining, I think, in Fremont County, maybe one looking at going in, but
Technically, what we're talking about is mineral mining, because we do have sand and gravel. We've got the
Yeah.
quarry right there. They both have the potential to add pollutants so what happens is you've got earth, you've got earth with mineralized zones in it. If you dig into the mineralized zone, what you're doing is you're bringing things to the surface that can oxidize, which means make them more soluble generally. So rain can then dissolve those and take them down into so there's, but you also have your natural earth that can do the same thing just naturally.
yes,
That we have no control.
no, and we really don't.
How do you
And-
minimize this, if at all?
And that would be something that we would look at mostly probably through land use planning and that. We have a really small section of town on that section, so, and most of that's agriculture, there is a little bit of commercial there. I was gonna say also, like with sand and gravel, industrial, other mining. They also have their own stormwater discharge permits from the state, and they have to do monitoring on their discharges.
I'm sure they have stringent regulations. So
They have way more stringent.
And
Do they
monitoring and
consider
some treatment.
Do they consider rainfall as part of this when they're looking at? You said they didn't look at flow rates and things when they look at temperature,
No.
so.
No, not really.
Okay. We gotta.
Well, they will look. They don't necessarily come like where we have ends of pipe and sample during storms. They have already proposed that the cities need to start doing, the permittees need to start doing that. We on nutrients, the CSC fought back. They wanted an automated outfall sampler at every single pipe outlet in the permit section. That would be 80 some. And our pipes carry a combination of groundwater, stormwater, and irrigation return flows. And I could not get an answer if their primary flow was irrigation or groundwater, if that would be exempted. So you're talking many millions of dollars to install these automated. We pushed back and managed for the stormwater MS4 permits, the phase 2, to address nutrients through education and outreach and collaboration to a statewide program. Wastewater treatment plants weren't so lucky. But usually they only have one point where they discharge.
Right.
So they have to sample. So this is the kind of things that we look at and keep an eye on. We want water quality. We don't want to break our citizens' backs meeting the requirements.
It is a complicated system. There's lots of, their lawyers get involved in it too. Especially when you're talking about 303D listing and things like that. And it gets their rules are pretty arcane and arbitrary. And there's special rules for special people. So that, anything can happen once they start regulating. That gets pretty crazy.
Can't change that either.
Yeah.
No, that's all we can do is keep an eye and try to be in front of it, be aware of what's coming up or what might be coming up. Try to stay on top of it, hopefully ahead of it.
Okay.
Thank
Any other questions for Glenda? Why don't we go ahead and take a quick 5-minute break here? And
I appreciate your time.
thank you very
Um,
much.
I will get you that presentation on the TMDL, and like I said, I'm happy to come back and discuss anything, or you can always reach out and discuss things further.
On this slide here, you have non-point discharge elimination. It's actually a national pollution discharge elimination system.
Thank you. Nifties. It's,
Yeah, that is.
yeah.
It is.
Heard anything more on
Yeah,
I knew.
Third Street is across.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we're happy, really appreciate it. We're waiting out there on the offside. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right on the first two.
Oh, yes, like, yeah, but I think that's-
No, usually that's like. With just ordinance or something like that. I'm learning.
In old drawing. That's.
Well, like.
It's my understanding. They came.
Wall online system or something like that for CIS. That you cannot execute operating system or something.
I'd have to look at how close, but that.
Yeah, because that's.
There'd be city.
No.
I'm sure it's Monday.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, Brian. Good, you're doing pretty good. Yeah.
Wouldn't have, I'm sure it wouldn't happen today.
Oh, thank you.
It wouldn't feel anything like that.
Right.
I mean, look it out on roads.
About legal.
They built blocks.
I think
They built blocks. over.
Yeah, yeah.
So there.
Yeah.
Which
I
is
looked
fine.
at yours.
It could have
Then
been,
it was there.
I was thinking
So I think we're.
Third Street. would
I
be-
put mine to the east of 4 Mile
Yeah,
Parkway.
we'll get the traffic turning to go to the first.
Yeah.
Well, that's good
Yes.
stuff to know because.
They'll go across, they'll set it in the middle. Of that place, it's going across. I'm like outside of the city limits, essentially, like. we mentioned it, bumps in and leaves kind of thing.
Well, my understanding is that the board,
So people who wanna put a business out there.
They can't do that.
see a true traffic count.
Yep, okay.
Yeah.
that much of an angle.
They had their, they just had everything more stressed.
So you'd have to start way back.
That'd be our sign.
Yeah.
But I think it was look good.
I mean, it's easy.
I don't want left turn cars parking on top of the hoses.
I know Mr.
Was I
Seifer
points, so I tried to go through the left turn and I put it on the side, I thought less people would use the left turn, except the one.
He would have done this if he would have.
his brothers on the board.
Yeah.
Both-
That was a question that just came up, we were talking about, I think this is budget for I'm sure.
Yeah.
Wondering about, is it, do we have any counters, about any idea how
They
many?
kind of read the silence as soon as people start.
I could ask, and I said I couldn't.
There have been, as a matter of fact, I just keep wondering, what's going on over there?
Sure. We're seeing on us, there's like middle of the road, but we're trying to get ours. So.
Yeah, we like to know, yeah, definitely knowledge.
We're pushing to do it this weekend. If I get the permit back from CDOT tomorrow, which sounded like I could. Something that I'll just start saying that a year. They want.
That's interesting, but usually, and it drops, it'll drop off dress.
That's for.
And that's what it'll drop, yeah, as soon as yeah.
We'll get weekends before years. Not one side, the next or the two. after.
Always and forever.
That,
Well,
yeah, we just, that's fine. we just-
remember-
We've got-
So I'm good.
Once
Okay,
there's
I'm
a-
gonna rewrite it.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's nothing that you
Well, this photo girl.
decide you wanna take back.
Yeah, you're gonna- I think Mountains was.
Not yet. Now, the boys, we hope to get, some 14ers, but we'll probably do more like September.
Yeah.
Matthew, we definitely like to do a couple 14ers for the boys. So, but no, haven't even gotten up to the mountain yet, you know. So, yeah, we had Kobe's mom's 100th and that's, and I don't even get it, I can't do it.
My days are gone,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what do you guys, so I came by your place, morning, I think, or was it 200? And on the chair. They finally figured out that might be something wrong with that house.
My house, is the
Yeah.
house.
Yeah, with all the windows broken out in the back.
Yeah, they parked in my place.
Got that, yeah.
It is.
Right,
But,
you can do
that's their-
Oh, yeah.
In, yeah, they got all. kinds of-
that. I'm sure they did. Probably bad.
She just goes.
It's stuff all over the place, all the windows broken out.
We'll be going to. That's an
Let's take care of it. Oh, I know.
So it's a little disconcerting
Very
to see you.
Greenhouse.
Right in front of your house.
I know.
I think that's an-
I already know. I think it's something like, yeah, road goes off there. Let's try to get people out. It's not great.
Yeah, we love this stuff.
Yeah, I know. I know. So,
That tree should have been taken out. First start.
That's
Obviously, but your gate, because it rains every- So coming out of my pipe. There's a 9-inch line. Irrigation water has some of that.
We all.
So
all
that's.
that.
It may be not a wholesale, but we
Go back.
picture a contract.
Okay.
Right.
Contract.
Let's get started up again here.
I'll have one.
So we did hear from Glenda on stormwater. I don't think we have any source water updates. Anybody have a source water update? Any legislative updates? Yes,
I was gonna give 2 quick updates and then
great.
point to something, but, well, actually, one, I guess, because I was gonna mention the WOTUS, the SACA decision that you talked about, and the state's decision, but there's another one that's more local, but it's really being fought out at the state is the Hill controversy over the fishing and angling
Yeah.
up there. I'm sure Tim knows a lot about it, but basically, in Colorado, people can own the bottom of the stream, but you don't own the right to prevent people from floating on the water. But they're challenging that to say that the high water mark should be the navigable part of the stream bed, and nobody should own that, so people can wade and stuff, but basically it got thrown out, or it was found to not have standing in the Supreme Court, so it's basically the Supreme Court's not gonna hear it, so the appellate.
That's Colorado.
Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the appellate court said, no, there's no right for people to waive. But there's a lot of groups still fighting it, and they're trying to maybe do a legislative workaround. But that has people concerned because that opens up what people call the public trust doctrine. And California institutes that, so if you guys are interested in public trust doctrine, look at California, but. It could have implications for not just waiting on the stream bed, but also water rights and how water rights are administered, so. It's a pretty big bag of mess, and so I guess the short of it now is there's no decision, nothing has changed, but there's a big wave of. Support trying to overturn this, or trying in support of the Hill. Mr. Hill.
They still can't portage, right?
Still can't portage, still, that's what they're trying,
That's what they want.
That's what they
Do you know
want.
how many states roughly do high water mark?
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah.
Montana does, California does, yeah, Michigan, in the western states. It's less common than in the eastern states, but in the western states, still, most of them have some sort of. I don't know if it's public trust doctrine, but they have a legislative. Fix basically for that. So, that was just one legislative update I want to give, so keep your eye out for this Hill that pops up in the Denver Post or the Canyon Daily Record a lot.
So
Hill decision, is that kind
Yeah.
of?
Yeah, Hill versus
Warsaw.
whatever, yeah, something like that.
well, there was that thing up, what was it, Big Thompson? And that canyon there was somewhere up there was a heck of a fight over the portage
Yeah.
and the people. The people that want to portage.
Right.
So
It really does. I mean, today's environment. Sorry. Got a stream bed here, and they want to come here, pretty soon they're out here, pretty soon they're out here, pretty soon they're out here.
Yeah, and the stuff in the Denver Post ran an op-ed that was really aggressive in support of it, and theirs was even more aggressive than most states and like where people could go on private lands, and so it was, there's some real strong feelings around this, and I guess what it really gets to is the navigability that she was pointing to, and then all of a sudden you start carving out essentially public easements, either to wade in the stream or on the banks or wherever. That opens up what's in our constitution, which is the public trust of natural resources, and water is one of them. So people are concerned that if you open up the public trust doctrine, all of a sudden water rights are in jeopardy because of things like water quality benefits or pollution that should be enjoyed by the people of the state. That water rights may not be their priority. So it's really opening up this public trust doctrine, which is based off of navigability, that has people really concerned.
Do you know what they use for high water mark?
I think it varies, but in Montana it's kind of the standard. The Montana legislature set there, and it's like the 5-year floodplain or something like that.
Do you know-
5-year flood.
do you know when they established that floodplain standard?
No,
The,
because that takes,
the reason I'm asking that is because if you've got a deed that shows that you have property rights out to a boundary that includes where people may want to wait. You know, and if the state comes in and says, wait a minute, no, that's a public trust and that now, public right of way, that now belongs to us. Technically, that's a taking. And so that gets right into the, really huge constitutional issues there.
Yeah, it's really opening up a bunch of like different layers of nuts that people didn't necessarily expect. It's way more than just,
Yeah, can I go fish?
Yeah, exactly. But now it's-
It is, it's really a big deal, especially north of it in the Gallatin Valley and where the big landowners have come in and really and bought off the property, and then they won't let people historically use the
Yeah.
rights that they've always used.
Right,
So that's-
exactly. Yep. A lot of different angles on those subjects. And thank you for that. Thanks for that, Blake. And did you say you had something?
Let's leave.
No, okay. Subject matter experts, what I did is, I got a email from. I did skip that, thank you.
Yeah, we need you.
Let's back up here a little bit. So Travis sent us a draft. It's no ordinance number, but first, ordinance of series 2023.
They can get an ordinance until like first reading. I think is when they-
Yeah, it's gotta be decided maybe before.
Yeah. And so what our role here is to review this, and if we have some. Say intelligence or some comments or something that we think that it's important for the city council to know. What we want to do is feed that into the committee, the city council committee meeting where this will be considered first. What our charter says is that when we do ordinances, it has to go through a process. It's not, you just don't bring an ordinance to city council, you're supposed to go through general government first, and or vision. And then get that ordinance to in front of this council that way. So
what's our question?
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, so what are you asking us to look at? Are there something specific, or is this a good ordinance for us?
So essentially that, I mean, unless that's part of what we have to do, I think, as a committee is say, hey, is there something specific about this that council should know about, or council should consider in their deliberations about whether to pass this ordinance or not?
And yet, is this for new wells, new possible? I mean, it's terribly hard to get a potable well anyway.
I think it's for existing, it means existing wells within the city
Yes.
limits, right?
Shall I just give?
Yeah, give us a
Go ahead.
second.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
All right, so this, this is kind of out of the purchase of New Method Laundry. So what we found when we did some investigation on that property is New Method, didn't do the best job of containing their chemicals. And so some of that reached the ground. And so there is a plume of chemicals that are coming out of the New Method Laundry site, old New Method Laundry site now, city property. So in part of the EPA's, I don't remember the acronym, but basically cleanup plan that was approved for us, we have to pass an ordinance that at least bans wells in the plume area. It's very defined there. It's a small area. Starting at Main Street where the New Method was, I don't remember the address, offhand, doesn't really matter, but anyways, yeah. Starting there, and it doesn't quite reach the river, or if it does, it's a very, very low amount of contaminant.
The last monitoring well was over by Stratton.
Yeah, so that's kind of, and it's kind of, a teardrop, the way you'd expect them to look. So in that kind of polygon, if that's what you want to call it, that's where we are going to be required to ban wells for drinking. There's some language in there that's kind of up for interpretation, but the long and short of it is, it looks like it'd be banned for drinking and anything that could be used for edible plants. If you're using it to water lawns, that's okay, but if you're using it for a garden for like tomatoes, again, anything edible, probably not okay. So that's going to be the base requirement.
For humans, or what about hay?
For humans, I believe it's for you. Again,
We-
there was.
I don't think we
some
have,
wording
to-
there
I
to
don't think we
that.
have to worry about hay fields,
Okay.
Main Street.
You do.
No, so this is specific, to a specific area, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
so
So,
let me
Yeah.
circle back to this ordinance then. The way this ordinance is written now is city limits, okay, but it's not what is going to be required. A lot of municipalities generally don't allow drinking water wells in the city limits. They just say, if you want water, you have to connect to the municipal system, okay? So what we have to do, it's just the way this is written right now.
And that's been the city of Canyon City's practice, though we do not have an ordinance or a policy specifically that.
right, okay.
Correct.
So. You cannot drill. A well. Unless you have 35 acres, right? Tim?
Right.
I think it's
Okay.
In the state.
That's
In the state.
Okay, yeah. So. If there's already. A law. Or whatever you want to call it. That says, unless you own 35 acres. You cannot drill. Potable or any other well. Like I say, unless you have 35 acres. So why are we being redundant here?
Well, this is,
To
this is.
do it again.
This is actually, they're talking about, like, I know there's several properties that have wells within the city limits of Canyon City.
Okay.
And because they're built, those properties were built before there was a municipal water system. And so those wells they may still exist, but you can't, but you have to, you're required to have a water tap. Your water from your private house has to be from a water tap from the city. And that was just an agreed upon thing when. I would imagine that sometime when the development when municipal water came in and they started coming in, then those houses had to hook into the system.
Right.
Um,
And so if you read the
So-
language of like, F, the property connects to the city's water system. It is required to disconnect from a private water well. However, the owner may continue to utilize the well for outdoor irrigation use so long as such use is authorized by a valid well permit and there is no cross connection between the well system and any water using building or structure or indoor potable water system,
Yeah.
inclusive of the city's water system. So you can still have it.
Okay,
So this doesn't
You
have
just
to,
can't have it connected in with anything that is being served by city water.
what if, I mean, you can have your water test. Like you guys have to do all the time.
Mhm.
You have to send in.
Mhm.
In packing house business. If a packing house is on a private well. It had to be tested every 6 months. For potability. Not necessarily for all these other chemicals.
Right,
So. I guess I would wonder, I would think if you had a property within the city. And. Almost like a. Huh?
well,
It is.
yeah, but yeah,
well, what,
And
So-
if you want to use that well. I'm not necessarily talking about for in-house use. And does this ordinance say you can't use it at all, or can you use it for outdoor use?
news brought.
The owner may continue to utilize the well for outdoor irrigation use, so long as such use is authorized by a valid well permit, and there is no cross connection between the well system and any water use.
Okay, so how does the city propose to monitor a well that was drilled prior to 1971 and you know nothing about it?
So again, when it starts off, when a property connects to the city's water system.
Okay,
So that is the trigger.
Okay.
So if
Okay.
they say, we want to connect to the city water system, and we say, okay, do you have a well? Yes, okay, then you have to disconnect from that well in your house.
Because there's a back.
okay,
Yeah,
It's a back.
It's a back-
Okay, that's what they're worried
and so that, I think that's important to keep in mind. Although this may have been triggered by the new method laundry, this is not really the cure for what our consent decree is gonna say with CDPHE. this is a kind of a separate issue.
Mhm.
That we're still dealing with the same topic, water wells, and their use within the city. But it's a little bit, it's not quite on that yet.
Okay.
So what this does, is just what Travis said, is when you connect, if you've got a well, the issue is there a cross connection possibility between that well and our city water system?
Oh, I can understand that for
Yeah.
sure.
So that's what this ordinance
So
does.
basically, this ordinance is just putting into clarification and making an ordinance of something that already exists.
Code of
Practice,
So-
really.
So
practice.
that now, so that it's all been a practice, it's been existing,
Yes,
and so now
And to
it's
be
just,
clear,
now it's just a rule.
out in the county, like I think I've had two in my tenure of water superintendent. Where people have wanted wells for irrigation. 4
Yeah.
Mile Lane was one and Lincoln Park was another,
Right.
funny enough, but. That they just wanted a well and the state then comes to me or the city as municipal water, and says, do you approve, is this okay with you? And so my reply has been to those two, yes, as long as. You know, there's no interconnection with the water supply.
So do you know of any residents in Canyon City? That has a private well that is not connected to the public system?
We're not gonna tell you.
My answer to that
That's
would-
okay,
Yeah.
that's okay.
So
Let's
Yeah.
just-
Yeah,
And
so my
Okay,
answer to
so
that
that-
would be, no, I don't know of any specific sites, but
Okay.
it would not surprise me one iota if there
If
were
there
other
are.
wells out there that people are using.
And maybe
for
a bunch.
irrigation.
Yeah,
And I,
maybe a bunch.
to be clear about that, I don't care about that one bit either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we had one of those, when we lived in Lincoln Park, and that's where the only issue I see in here is when you say, however, the owner may continue to utilize the well for outdoor irrigation uses. Ours was also plumbed in to feed for livestock, and that's a decreed actual use in a well permit.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe strike out this instead of for outdoor irrigation use, because some people might want to fill their other parcel.
You could say we're not,
Outdoor
non,
uses.
Just not for
Not
in-house.
household, yeah, not all not household uses, so long as they're authorized. as well, or something like that.
Yeah,
When you just
That's-
single out
yeah,
irrigation,
that's good.
like permits are more nuanced, so.
Sure. I like that.
So-
way.
And I don't know,
Yeah,
I don't know if people use like gray water systems here at all, but could you also use that well water for your toilet tanks and things? If, I don't know. if
No,
people do that or
no,
not.
that's-
You're
that's-
saying don't. do that.
Cross connection, the issue is.
and I'm pretty sure that
We're
we're
not
not,
that
their
green
radar
here.
systems are not allowed.
We're not that
Right,
green
I'm
here.
pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure, I'm almost
Yeah.
positive.
Just
We're
like-
not Douglas County, we can't-
Asking. Just asking.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
Yeah, I think that's why not, no great.
just checking. Just checking.
Okay, so.
Thank
That's our first win for the committee.
Oh, it's far.
Yeah.
Your change?
like I said, it singles out irrigation.
Yeah.
like, But instead of saying just all outdoor uses authorized by the well permit, because some well permits are for livestock.
Yeah.
Right, especially for those 35 acre permits, say there's livestock, irrigation, up to 1 acre, like they listed out.
Yeah. Yes,
So I would
Yeah.
just say like whatever is consistent with the well permit, saying indoor use.
Yeah, and I think that there's also another, Leo brought this up. Another one to add in there is like a geothermal well. I know it's rare nowadays, but you know, they do exist, so if someone
Yeah.
wants to drill a well for heating their house or something like that.
yeah,
There certainly would be an allowed use. Yeah, again, just as long as it's not connected to the system. Yeah, yeah.
So was one in Lincoln Park, if it was connected to the system and there was an issue with flushback, did that affect the whole system?
Well, that's why backflow protection is so important.
So-
Because
so-
there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about and we're not going to know about.
Should this include your whole system and not just in city limits?
I mean, it could, that is certainly a direction you could take.
That gets trickier
It
legally.
gets tricky.
Yeah, standard enforcement is tricky.
Yeah.
I think we
still have jurisdiction within our water district.
We do.
Your water
Yeah,
district,
we certainly could.
especially for backflow.
The city, is it the city that has jurisdiction or the district that has jurisdiction?
The city is the district. Yeah, same thing.
Okay,
We're not a district, to be clear.
oh, okay.
Yeah, we are a city entity.
Because there's a lot of wells in Lincoln Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, it still would be practice. If somebody wants to connect into the system,
they can't have well water into their house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We, you know, that would be something that we would make sure that.
And,
What we heard here is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, but,
Okay.
yeah. Actually, I don't think it's written that way. Ian. I think because it says when a property connects to the system,
What city water system? yeah.
city water system, so it does not
Yeah, I
limit
mean, you're
where
right.
the property
Yeah.
is.
So
Right.
that's inclusive out
The
there.
original intent was inside city limits, but this.
But this is actually,
Yeah,
This is the system.
so,
which honestly, you know, in talking this out, probably be the way it should go.
It should be.
Again, it's not banning wells. It's saying you connect the water system, you cannot have that water being consumed,
Right.
so it should,
which probably. Does need to be double checked with what the state requirements were, that, you know, wasn't an outright ban on wells in the plume. That might have to be an additional thing,
So do you go plume?
Work with Rich on that.
yeah.
yeah,
Is it only within the plume, what you call the plume?
well,
If another plume is discovered,
that would be,
then that would be included in.
no, that's separate. You'd have to do it separate. What I hope that we, the city does, when we ban wells, to comply with our, it's not really a consent decree, but it's a corrective action plan, when we comply with that corrective action plan. We want, in my view, the city needs to limit it to the plume area. Okay, because that's what the issue is. And plumes, of course, generally with overtime dissipate and boundaries shrink and stuff like that. So setting a boundary now based on our information should be good enough, and that, you know, meet what we have to do under the corrective action plan, but not get too wild and try and do it citywide or something.
Okay, so here,
This is a separate
shouldn't that
issue.
be put into this?
Not necessarily, no.
So this is, like we said earlier, this is codifying the practice that
Yes.
we currently follow. As far as the plume goes, we're hoping to reach natural attenuation before we have to take any legislative action.
You got a big ass plume coming out of copper.
Yeah, that's what.
That's
It's shrinking. But yeah, it's there. And it's in your water. district.
Which I kind of want to make the comment, I was really curious if the state was gonna allow a well in Lincoln Park area.
Yeah, the
And
guy
you
across the
couldn't-
street from me
Well,
has a
they've
well.
closed a lot of them up.
But you can't irrigate your vegetable garden with if you're in a plume, like say the Cotter plume. And if you're in Lincoln Park and had a well, you couldn't use that water on your vegetable garden. for human
That's not
consumption.
quite true. That's not what the EPA came out and said. What the EPA came out and said is something my mom taught me. That if you do use the water, wash your vegetables first before you eat them. You know,
That's kind of like washing the fish out of Louise resin.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think the way it's read, it's in your district, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Water service boundary.
Yeah, well,
So do we need to cover this now or is?
Yeah.
So how's it gonna read?
But I think we keep it, when a property connects to the city, when they choose to connect to the city's water system, the city's water system. They have to disconnect any well use. For their household plumbing. That well will only be able to use for all outdoor uses. Or non-domestic might be better way to put that.
Permitted
Yeah,
well.
no, you
Yeah.
have to keep water
Yeah.
uses
You know,
as
yeah,
per
that
well
needs to be
permit.
an addition there, because right now it states. It is required to disconnect from a private well, period.
Well, no, they said you can use it.
Yeah, however, the owner may continue to utilize.
Yeah.
the well.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead. Yep, yep.
okay,
okay, then the other one is resolution 17 series of 2021.
Oh, sure, we get about 17 minutes, we can. Resolution 17, series of 2021 was a program that was developed to try to incentivize multi-family housing. So the purpose of this committee will just to be talking about B, not A. A is building permits, so that does not have anything to do with the water committee. If you read B, the tap fee for multifamily units will be calculated by taking 3/4 inch rate for the first unit, 50% of the 3/4 inch rate for each additional unit, or the total fee for the tap size needed for the multifamily development, whichever is greater. So I will explain that a little further. Unless everybody has it, right?
I got
Yeah, okay, anyhow. So I'm just gonna use an apartment building that has 20 units as an example, okay? That 20 unit apartment building will probably need something like a 2-inch water tap. That's the physical water tap, okay? That's not necessarily what they're gonna be built at, though, okay? You have the physical water tap price. And then you have the multi-unit price, okay, so that's 20 units. Based on a 3/4 price, which is $5,000 right now. So if you're using the multi or theoretical tap fee price, it would be $5,000 times 20 units, okay, a lot of money. 2-inch water tap, if you guys want exact prices, but let's just talk about this section of it right now. The point being, you have two different ways of giving water tap price, physical, or then the multi thing, you have number of units, okay? So when it talks about the total fee for the tap size needed for the multifamily development, that's talking about physical or the calculated. So when we're doing the calculated one, it's saying, okay, the first one you have is $5,000. The other 19 is $2,500, 50%, okay? So the only thing that's really gonna help is the larger units, okay? Because if you only need a 1-inch for, say, a fourplex, okay, the 1-inch, I think is, give me 1 second. That sounds about right, but on the other hand, an exact.
1,800?
No,
I think 3.
yeah, it's 21 second.
You said the 2-inch, is how much?
2-inch would be $26,600.
26,000.
Currently, okay.
Yeah.
So like a smaller one, I'll say for again, for a fourplex, it's $8,350, okay? But that's 4 units, so without this, that'd be 4 units at $5,000, $20,000, so you have 8,000 or 20,000. So this is whichever is greater. If you read that, so it would go under the $20,000. So it would help this one actually, because it'd be 5,000 and then it would be 7,500 for a total of 12,500. So it'd be either 12,500 or 8,300. So that's reducing that price for what they pay in the theoretical water tap. Does everybody kind of have that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an, you said you have.
Incentive.
Yeah, it's
Incentive
an
to build
incentive.
multifamily.
So the reason we're talking about this is you can see that it sunsets
Sunsets, yeah.
August 31st, 2023, so it's coming right up. Okay. So the discussion that we'd like to have today in the next 13 minutes would be and it can be continued. Actually, a total conversation today. You know, whether it should be continued or not. Going to get into this. I don't know of any time it's actually going to be about this.
Oh, that's interesting.
Scholastica did.
Okay.
School.
But other than that,
So.
we had a whole bunch, well, we don't have a whole lot.
We don't know.
We haven't had a whole bunch, but there are a lot of state incentives for multifamily and for affordable housing right now. We do see some in the pipeline over the next 12 to 18 months. They could potentially go. So, you know, from an economic development standpoint, a housing standpoint, we would recommend moving forward with this because, you know, it is a very good incentive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as far as the health of the water fund, I mean, those water taps, yes, we do provide, but the incentive, in my opinion, is well worth it.
And the thing that from my perspective, the part that I would add on to this is that I would think that it would be appropriate to do another 2-year and sunset. So that it gets reviewed fairly periodically, so that if things change, you know, if there's something that happens that we can do it.
Figures might need to change.
If it may need- Absolutely. Maybe that might be something that we recommend at some point too.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion is cost of living increase. Maybe something like this would be proportional to your tax increase. So if you're having a tax increase of 30%. You need to add that 30% to your $5,000 or whatever you're doing here.
Well, the nice thing
Could be
is, I mean, it's not
proportional.
written out to 5,000, it's written out as 50% of the tap fee. So if the tap fee goes up, it's still just
Sure.
30% of that.
Just so you have that increase proportional to everything else in the economy every 2 years.
Yeah.
We're talking about.
The water master plan we're looking at.
Yeah, just so that we're not behind the eight ball financially.
Yeah.
In addition, we get to look at this under the water master plan. That's gonna be happening, water master planning.
So do we need a thumbs up? Is that-
Yeah,
Yeah.
thumbs up would be enough. Everybody,
Thumbs up.
Yep,
Okay.
I like it.
Does this go to general government then, or does it go like?
The
Well-
resolution can go straight to city council.
Yeah.
So that's not have to go to John.
and we're, so could we amend 17 of 21 to?
We'll do a resolution for this year and yeah, have Rick work on that, so. We'll just,
Cool.
one other quick thing here before we part ways, but we did get an email from DOLA where they were talking about the different water issues and how DOLA interacts with those. So I have a email out to Scott Williamson with DOLA, asking them if they can either show up here at one of our committee meetings or Zoom in to tell us what DOLA is doing about water, what resources they've got, whatever they want to tell us about. Yes,
well, I've worked with Scott a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And I know his big thing is land use planning, and I know that's one of our topics, so I
Sure.
think we could kind of steer him in that direction. You got a lot of good resources on land use planning and water planning.
And to be clear, we are utilizing DOLA grants right now. That's what the.
and when we've invited experts in on different committees, what we said is, come tell us what you want to tell us.
Yeah.
You know, leave the field open, let them, do some prioritization, so.
Yeah.
You know.
So good. Well, yeah, if you want, it'd be great.
So I guess there's a seminar tonight up in Salida. Everybody's heard about that, about Colorado River water. Colorado River. I got some kind of message about it, but I didn't. I'm pretty sure it was nice. Sound like a pretty good something.
For sure, you haven't confirmed that, so I would send my brother up there.
Well, let me see if I can find it. It came up on I get all kinds of notices about water stuff.
And like.
Surprise, surprise.
Careful, it's gonna consume you.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I actually, that's where I sort of was going, it's just open. so.
Get involved in the ditch, we don't ever get.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's a lifelong sin.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think we're pretty heavily.
I
into this, Lighter.
Yeah, after the meeting or.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
We're all good?
I appreciate it, everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.